Dr. Scott Kaufman is with us this morning. Dr. Kaufman is the history chair at Francis Marion University. Before we go down the road of investigations in Russia and the likes, you're a Jewish gentleman. I've got a theory with Netanyahu that I think you'll agree with. I think you and I conceptually disagree about Netanyahu's leadership qualities. I'm kind of fond of the way he's led the nation of Israel, but it does appear to me that he tries to provoke U.S. involvement, that at every turn he's, implying the president's got to do the right thing. And the right thing is always for the U.S. to intervene in whatever conflict Netanyahu may think is his priority today. I'm not asking your opinion of Netanyahu as a leader of the nation of Israel, but does he try to use and utilize the aggressive nature of Donald Trump to intervene in affairs that relate to Israel?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, I was watching TV when he gave his presentation yesterday, and the way he did it was absolutely aimed at Donald Trump.
He had an audience of one, didn't he?
Yeah, that's all he wanted. Video clips, PowerPoint presentation, it's all visual. And for Donald Trump, a person who grew up in entertainment, not grew up in entertainment, but has been involved in entertainment, who likes the visuals, this was a perfect way to get Donald Trump's attention.
Having said that, I want to go back to what I said I was not going to ask you. I am going to ask you this. Does the relationship between Netanyahu and Trump concern you?
Yes, it does.
In what way?
Because I think Netanyahu has found somebody who is willing to take positions that I think are not beneficial to Middle East peace. Whether it be moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, to scrapping the JCPOA.
But those are very pro-Israel positions.
They are, and they appeal to Trump's base as well.
But here's my question, Scott. Are those pro-Israel positions or are those pro-Netanyahu positions?
Well, I think it depends who you speak to. Certainly for Trump and for many members of his base, it would be their pro-Israel positions. That the United States needs to be behind Israel. Israel's our number one ally in the region. There are religious reasons for supporting Israel. Israel is under threat. And the argument almost becomes one that Israel is unable to take care of itself, which I think is not a fair argument to make. And therefore, the United States has to take these positions in support of Israel.
But a lot of the Trump base their, revelations on a belief that Netanyahu is immensely popular in the nation of Israel. Netanyahu's kind of a polarizing figure in his country as Trump is in ours.
Very polarizing. Don't forget, the guy's under investigation right now for corruption. Even the Israeli police say there's enough there to indict the guy.
So, as someone of Jewish descent, as someone who I would imagine keeps up very closely with the goings-on of Israel, is Netanyahu net good or net bad for the nation of Israel? We know he's good for the relationship with Trump. I don't think anybody can deny that. They're kind of a kindred spirit in regards to that. But do you think Netanyahu, what we question on the show every morning, the job or the good job or not so good job Donald Trump does, from your perspective, handicap the job Netanyahu has done in leading the nation of Israel?
I think he's net bad. I think he takes positions, like I said, that are harmful to Israel and Israel's interests. And I know there are going to be many of our listeners who totally disagree with me on this. But to take positions that are going to undermine the Middle East peace process, that are going to potentially open the door up to a nuclear arms race in the Middle East, when you have that kind of arms race, if an accident happens, you're talking about nuclear Armageddon. I think these are very dangerous positions he's taking, and I think they're much more harmful to Israel's interests than beneficial.
Last question to you, as someone who doesn't paint Netanyahu in a positive light, what would you like to see he and Trump? What conclusion do you think Netanyahu and Trump need to come to in regards to Iran?
I think they need to stand behind the JCPOA. I'm not saying the JCPOA is perfect, but I think as the way the JCPOA stands, also based upon the fact that the International Atomic Energy Agency has found no evidence whatsoever that Iran has violated it. And last but not least, if you look at the White House's own website, where they changed their language from Israel has a nuclear weapons program to just yesterday, Israel had a nuclear weapons program. Even the White House realizes that that Iran no longer has such a program. In fact, that the information that was being put out is nothing new that Netanyahu put out yesterday. So I think every reason to stand behind this agreement.
So you're saying that it was propaganda yesterday?
Yes.
Interesting. We are doing a Facebook Live segment. You can watch what Alec is filming by going to our Facebook page at Live953. I have no idea what I just said. They just tell me to make sure I say it every time we do a Facebook.
Notice you said filming, though. That was kind of funny.
Is it filming? I mean, what are we doing?
Everything's digital now. There's no film.
What are we doing? We're recording. We're recording a segment for Facebook Live at Live953. You can watch it in real time. I've got a theory. I want to get your opinion of my theory. We've been trying to analyze not the effect of Trump, but the eventual replacing of what is Trump? What will Trump's legacy be? What will he be known for? Scott, I've got a theory that very often you've got to identify a problem, shine a light on a problem, and maybe it's not your responsibility to correct the problem. I got a buddy who believes Trump's a con man. I mean, he thinks Trump's a political talent. He thinks he gets loudly and clearly how Trump ended up winning the election. But at the end of the day, he believes Trump falls into the category of a con man. I would argue that if Trump is a con man, who better to identify and bring light a con, because I believe the federal government is pretty much a con right now. It's not representing the interests of the American public. I don't want the country to turn into a world of politics that chases to the gutter, that always considers the lowest common denominator. Trump is great at, I think you would agree, that Trump is phenomenal at turning everything into a street fight. Don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you would agree to that. I mean, he has an uncanny ability to lure you or entice you into a street fight.
Well, I mean, he uses superlatives. He appeals to many of our base instincts.
Okay. Having said that, could it be that Trump was elected not to fix Washington, but to expose Washington for the con game that a lot of Americans believe exist?
I mean, the two aren't necessarily, you can't necessarily separate the two.
Explain.
I mean, if you believe that there is a con game there, then by exposing it, you're able to figure out what's wrong with it and then fix it. And I have no doubt that I've said this, one of the reasons why Trump was elected was this feeling that the establishment, quote unquote, did not represent the American people, and it's time for us to go for someone who is not tied to the establishment.
But Scott, you understand that. I mean, you and I've talked enough. I mean, I know you're not a Trump supporter, but you don't believe that people just went off the reservation. You believe there was a thought behind and a rationale behind Trump. You disagree with the rationale, but you certainly understand why people got to that point.
Yeah, I mean, this whole idea of draining the swamp, I think that, and I've talked about this on campus as well, that I think this was a buildup taking place over a long period of time where Americans said every time we think we get a revolution in Washington, fresh faces who say we're going to change the way things are run, what ends up happening? They become part of the establishment, quote unquote, nothing changes, and it's time for us to go completely in an opposite direction and choose someone who's an outsider, someone who has no ties to the establishment, someone who we think can drain the swamp. And so no matter what, despite the fact that he said things that appealed to base instincts, despite the fact that he said things that were highly, highly controversial, there were many Americans who said, well, at least he tells it like it is. And so he's a fresh voice, a fresh face. Let's get him in.
Okay, and we got him in, and now he's dealing with an investigation. And he has been dealing with an investigation. You were sitting in the lobby when I read some of the New York Times report. I'm not going to go over 49 questions with you verbatim, but the generalities are, to me, there's less attention to collusion with Russia. There's more of an attempt, as far as I'm concerned, with Mueller's perceived questioning about obstruction of justice. Do you agree or disagree
Yes,
with that?
Looking at that, yes.
Okay. What questions lead you to believe that Mueller is indeed investigating or going down the road of whether or not Trump and his, Trumpsters, for lack of a better descriptive, may have obstructed justice. What would you be most concerned with if you were a Trump supporter?
Well, I haven't looked at all 49 questions, but certainly questions about Michael Flynn, for instance. I think those might be some issues there. Questions about these meetings between Russians, and I think there's a question on there about meetings between the Russians at Trump Tower and Jared Kushner. What kind of discussions were taking place between members of the Trump campaign and the Russians? Those kinds of questions, I think, aim toward the issue of obstruction of justice conspiracy. And then, of course, some of Trump's tweets, which have raised questions about what he knew and when he knew it.
I want to ask you a question, because here's one of the 49 questions that I find a little bit unusual. And this is where I wonder how specific this investigation is, or indeed if this is just some random investigation, kind of a big net. We throw a big net out there, hoping eventually we catch something. Here's one of the 49 questions. What is the reason for your continued criticism of Mr. Comey and his former deputy, Andrew McCabe? What relevancy would that question have in a potential collusion investigation? What is the reason for your continued criticism of Mr. Comey and former deputy director Andrew McCabe? That sounds like a question Chuck Todd would ask, not so much a special counsel.
Well, I think a couple of things here. Number one is these questions are very likely questions that the Trump people would have already been. I mean, they've been told about them. There are probably no surprises in there. And questions like that, there are a couple of possibilities there. One is to get more at who Trump the person is, Trump's character, but also maybe to try to see what Trump says in response to those questions. What, for instance, does Mueller already know? And so how do the responses to these questions jibe or not with what Mueller already knows? And if, in fact, Trump gives a response that does not match what Mueller already knows based upon the evidence, then that can allow for additional questions, additional lines of inquiry. So it's possible that's one of those questions put out there, and just to see, get more about Trump the person, but maybe also just to see how he answers it.